The Volkswagen ID.4 was one of the most significant car launches of 2020, let alone electric car launches. Now we have the SUV version on the same MEB platform, the ID.4. Could this be the most significant car of 2021? But before we start to tell you about the ID.4, if you like this video, please don't forget to like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like the ID.3 when it initially arrived, VW is kicking off ID.4 sales with a first edition rather than going straight into the series run with multiple models. However, while the ID.3 had some clear teething troubles, particularly with its software, we would hope that the ID.4 will have learned from these initial mistakes and have a smoother arrival. Since the ID.3 now has over-the-air updates, the ID.4 should at launch. The design motifs of the ID.4 are clearly in the same family as the ID.3, but this is a much bigger car. It's 30 centimeters longer, 5 centimeters wider and 8 centimeters taller. However, this is an SUV, so you'd expect that, and having a pure electric platform with space efficient component location, this extra size should translate into extra space inside. The ID.3 was already roomy. The bonnet is not as stubby as the ID.3, which gives the ID.4 a more conventional appearance. There are some anodized rails on the top to attach loads to the roof. Since this is built on VW's MEB platform, the drivetrain has a lot in common with the ID.3. In fact, with the first edition, it's the Pro Performance one used by the ID.3 Tour, so marries that 204 PS rear-wheel drive electric motor with a sizable 77 kWh battery. There will be other versions of the ID.4 with a smaller battery and 2 other lower powered motors. So what does the first edition have? Well, actually, there's just one trim level. You can choose paints, and that includes blue, white, yellow and grey metallic, all of which are a bit more exciting than the basic battleship grey of the ID.3. None of these colours seems to be extra. There is also only one interior choice so far. These attractive diamond-turned 20-inch alloys are standard. Note that the rears are wider than the fronts. These are air-stop tyres, so in theory, minor punctures can be repaired using the appropriate sealant. A heat pump remains an expensive £1,250 optional extra, like it was with the ID.3. You also have to pay £180 extra for a charging cable, and the tow bar is an £850 add-on too. There's also quite an extensive list of accessories like roof boxes and floor mats. These are some of the largest wing mirrors I've ever seen in my life. One thing you don't get with the ID.4 is any kind of proximity locking and unlocking, so I'm going to have to press this button on the key to open it. Let's take a look inside. As we said earlier, you don't get a choice of interiors with the first edition, but at least the one choice is quite nice. This grey material with brown edges has a suede feel to it, but it's entirely synthetic. It has a pleasant feel to it. These seats are really comfortable and there's loads of space, loads of headroom, loads of room for your needs as well. If we have one gripe, it's that the seats are mechanically adjustable only. Electric memory seats are really useful if you share your car with somebody who's a very different height to you. However, on the plus side, both the front seats are heated, as is the steering wheel, which is great on a brisk day like this. There are 2 cup holders in the front. You can actually remove this and make it into a separate section for putting keys and other items in the front here. Slide back this door and there's another cubby that has dividers you could use to make further cup holding facilities. You can never have enough cups. There are 2 USB-C ports here for charging your phone, and also this cubby for putting your phone in, which looks like it should be a wireless charger, but like the original ID.3, isn't. It really should be in this day and age. This glove box is really a bit small for such a large SUV. If the ID.3 was spacious in the back, the ID.4 is positively palatial. Loads of headroom, loads of knee room. It just feels really comfortable. However, this central seat is still a little bit thin for an adult occupant to sit for a long period. Fine for a kid for a short period though. However, if you do only have 2 people in the back, you can pull this down to make an armrest with another couple of cup holders, and actually a very small cup holder for a really tiny cup in the middle. Rear passengers also get a couple of USB-C ports for attaching their devices and their own separate air vents. There are also magazine holders for the rear passenger, so little Boris can put his copy of The Spectator in, or whatever it is kids read these days. There are ISOFIX points for the 2 outer rear seats, and the front passenger seat has ISOFIX points too. When you open the boot, this is when you realise that this is not a crossover, it's a proper SUV. This is cavernous, it's 543 litres. You also get, under here, a small space for keeping your charging cables. There's nothing more than that though, because this is where the rear electric motor sits. Now, you can of course take this down. and it looks bigger still. Now the rear seats pull forward with the typical, and this is quite annoying actually. We wish that these catches were a little bit more accessible than this. And now what you have is a very sizable 1,575 litres. The VW Touareg and Audi e-tron give you more, but it's only about 100 litres less than a Range Rover Sport, so pretty roomy. Although it's a slight downside that you have this kind of lip in the boot where the seat's down, this is definitely a plus for the VW ID.4 because even with the seats up, there's tons of space in the back. There are nice touches like this handle for pulling the boot down. And let's also notice this here. There's clearly going to be a model with an electronic open and close mechanism. One thing that is different with the launch edition of the ID.4 compared to the ID.3 is that this version comes with a 77 kilowatt hour battery, whereas the launch edition of the ID.3 came with a smaller one. That's the same battery that they now put in the ID.3 Tour. This delivers a very promising 310 mile WLTP range, which is on par with the Tesla Model Y. And as you can see, there's no frunk. It is a bit bizarre, there's so much stuff in here because the ID.3 has a much smaller space. So I don't know quite what all this is, but it's obviously necessary. However, one thing we would say about this range is that 310 miles means you're going to get at least definitely over 200 miles of range when driving on a motorway, which may not be enough for somebody who wants to carry 18 kids, tow a caravan and do 800 miles without stopping. But it's going to be good enough for most families. Let's look at charging. This car has the usual CCS connector and DC charging supported all the way up to 125 kilowatts, which allows 80% charge in 38 minutes. On a 7 kilowatt home AC supply, you will need around 11 hours for a full charge. There's support for 11 kilowatt charging too. Assuming the WLTP range and a 14p per kilowatt hour supply, this car is actually reasonably economical for a big SUV at 3.5p per mile. Like the ID.3, and indeed a Tesla, there's no need to press a start-stop button. In fact, there isn't one. Press the brake pedal to start things up. If you've been inside an ID.3, this will be very familiar because it's very, very similar. The steering wheel is exactly the same. This is leather, and as we said, it's heated. You've got all the gubbins for the cruise control, which is adaptive on the left-hand side here. On the right is stuff for volume control and media control. You have a control stalk for the windscreen wipers on the right, which is a nice touch, and indicators and lights on the left. You might have heard... Yes, you can probably hear a very nice lady's voice who keeps interrupting me. That's because, yes, this car has voice control. If you've driven an i3, the BMW, before, this will be a bit familiar. So they seem to have copied it from that. You turn once up for drive mode, second time for B mode with the extra regenerative braking, then down for neutral or reverse, and there's a park button here on the right. You'll also notice this funky flashing light, which, if you do something you're not supposed to, it goes red. There's also this small bank of touch buttons on the right here for operating lights. This one here is actually for the auto braking, auto hold rather, and for operating the front and rear demisters, which is kind of handy, better than a Tesla having to hunt through an LCD panel. That's one minor difference with the ID.3, because the ID.3 has those buttons up here. If you want to actually change the engine power, you have to press this button here and go through a menu system, which is maybe not quite as intuitive as some cars. You'll also notice that the climate control does have a few separate buttons of its own. You can, when it's zoned on either side, you can move up and down. If you want the full controls, you have to actually go into the touchscreen menu. And this also gives you things like the electric heated seats, and there is the button for the heated steering wheel. So you'll see that this is a 10-inch screen. It's almost identical to the ID.3, and you can see that it does kind of sense when my hands get close and gives you a bit of prompting. You can have a look at the map there. So you can search for destinations. We're going to search for some chargers. Let's have a look there. You can also use these buttons on the bottom that call up the rear parking camera, even though I'm not in reverse. There's the camera, the climate control. I already talked about changing the power mode. This button here gives you some explanation of the assist modes, because this obviously got some radar for its adaptive cruise control, and go away, and going to make that go away again. And this button here actually gets you to the menu, so you can see the vehicle stuff. It's coming up to give me some options for my vehicle. So exterior, change those. Interior, change those. Interior lighting. The ID light is that funky thing I showed you just a few minutes ago. You can see that it's got DAB radio built in. It has, you can connect it to your telephone. It also supports Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and MirrorLink, so you can actually get your phone through here as well. There's some controls for the sound, slight graphic equalization there. You can kind of scroll through to different menus. You can actually change the way it functions with backgrounds. Let's go for some Euphoria, because that's the way we're feeling about this car. Maybe that's a little bit too red, so let's try something. Oh, let's go for Eternity. No, Desire, because we desire this car. You can see it's a pretty nice menu system actually. So you do get a 3-year subscription to VW's WeConnect, which includes WeCharge services with special rates from network partners. So let's go for a drive. Although 204 PS is a decent amount of power, this car does weigh 2.1 tons, so it's no Tesla beater in a straight line. In fact, it takes 8.5 seconds to reach 62 miles per hour. That's probably plenty for most families, and VW boasts a 50-50 weight distribution for the ID.4, so it handles surprisingly well for a big SUV. You do feel the weight, but there's not a tremendous amount of body roll in corners. This car sits very comfortably at motorway speeds, which are obviously a lot higher than we're doing right now. The top speed is 99 miles per hour, but there's no sense of strain at 70. With the great range, you can definitely take your family long distance in the ID.4. Obviously, this is a big car, so you're not going to be squeezing through every traffic gap like you might be in a Renault Zoe or Fiat 500e. However, the smooth steering and progressive power delivery makes this a very smooth car, even around cities. The suspension also seems to be quite forgiving of city potholes. You do get quite a lot of safety tech with the ID.4 as standard. That includes rear and front parking sensors, as well as a rear parking camera. There is a driver alert system with fatigue detection, but we haven't had the guts to try that. As we already mentioned, the cruise control is adaptive as standard. You get lane assist with camera controlled warnings. There's forward collision warning with proactive pedestrian protection, which is a hard thing to say when you're drunk, which obviously I'm not because I'm driving. There's also dynamic road sign display and an automated high beam system. One thing that appears to be missing is blind spot detection, although with these giant side mirrors, all-round visibility is very good. This first edition ID.4 costs the princely sum of £40,800, and thanks to the recent government plug-in car grant changes, you won't get any discount on that either. That does seem a little expensive when you can get a Kia e-Niro 2 long range for £32,500 including the plug-in grant. That only has 30 miles less range. It's quite an apt comparison when both cars have an identical amount of motor power and quite similar performance. However, the ID.4 has a lot more cargo capacity, and the rear-wheel drive system means that it handles much better. You also get more kit as standard, particularly that adaptive cruise control. Overall, we don't think this is a hideous price for an EV in this class. There will be cheaper variants and alternative cars from VW's sister brands like Skoda that also use the MEB platform. VW is also promising a sporty dual motor version of the ID.4 at a future date. We really can't wait to see that. Even before that arrives though, we can't help loving this car. You've got great visibility as standard, but actually with this reversing camera, which you'll see there, which is very clear, reversing is really quite easy in this car. The Volkswagen ID.4 is an excellent electric SUV. It's spacious, it's well built, and it has superb range. It's not particularly fast, but it's fast enough and drives well. That's the most important thing for families. It's also extremely practical. The one question is, could Skoda's Enyaq, built on the same platform, be even better? We'll have to wait and see. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.